Hello, class. This is Bill again, and I'm here to talk to Renee about his experience and how drugs impacted his life, his family, and let him share the story. So let me turn it over to you and just ask you to share with us how drugs came to impact your life.
Okay. It started when my ex-wife decided that she wanted to lose some weight. So she saw on TV an advertise about a Canadian pharmacy that sold a miraculous drug that helped you lose weight very fast. So she ordered it and arrived and she began to take it on a regular basis. And her behavior changed drastically. She was already a hyper person, a very, very active, type A personality. And when she started taking that, it went overboard. She began to be hyper and nervous and very aggressive, even physically aggressive. And I couldn't figure out that it was related to the drugs. I didn't know what was happening, so I took her to psychologists, psychiatrists, to priests, and nothing seems to work. But it was only later that after I read a number of books and then I read the components of that weight loss drug that I figured out that they had a chemistry very similar to cocaine. And as you know, cocaine is accelerate the whole metabolism. If the person is already hyper and you accelerate, it becomes over hyper and violent. So that's how probably a number of crimes are committed because people are on drugs and they become violent and they attack family members, they attack people in the society, they go and then rampages of shooting, stuff like that. That's my opinion of it. Anyways, after I learned that medication had this stuff, it was too late already. She had been for a number of years violent with me and became violent with the person that worked for us as well, to the point that that person left the home where she was living with us. And it so happened that she didn't have papers. She was illegal. So when she went to some neighbors that spoke Spanish, because she spoke Portuguese only, we are all from Brazil, and she complained about the situation with my ex. All those neighbors said, okay, well, come and work for us. Bring your papers. And she said she didn't have any papers. Oh, they realized, oh, this is an illegal person. They called the police. The police heard the story, decided to refer it to the FBI because the FBI was investigating everyone in the greater Washington, D.C. area that had illegal people working for them. The embassies, people who worked for embassies had a lot of that. But they end up, after they heard that was a nest trying to grab all the illegal aliens, they sent them back to their countries. I was not aware of what was happening. It was just a political move to please the voters. So I ended up getting caught in that net. They offered me 6 months if I pled guilty of having illegal alien working for me. And I said no, and she was living as a part of our family. She was being paid in Brazil. As a matter of fact, I read somewhere that a person could stay here without papers if the person is being paid by another country. She could still work here if she's not being paid in the US. So I got my mother-in-law to pay that lady in Brazil. She was paying her, but she could not prove it. When she brought the documentation, the courts dismissed it because they didn't have time to analyze it, so the prosecutor threw it out of court. All the proofs that she was getting paid in Brazil. In any event, I went to trial because I didn't want to plead guilty. Well, in the trial, they actually found that was guilty because I didn't do anything about the fact that she didn't have the paperwork, and they gave me 5.5 years. Well, in these 5.5 years, 13 months were done in the county jail. And the county jail is like a madhouse these days because they don't have a place where to put people who are insane. They just put them in the county jail. Well, I realized the very first day that this it felt exactly like hell would feel like. A bunch of crazy people around, would be daily fights, and during the fights, all guards would come with we call them Ninja Turtles, with all their armors, and they would throw people on the ground, put their foot on their necks, and stuff like that. Very crazy and scary. And I realized that I wanted to get out of that specific location. And I heard that there was a educational unit inside that people could volunteer to learn about and get their GED, whoever didn't have a GED. Well, since I had a doctorate degree, I had been a teacher for a number of years, I volunteered to go there and teach. So they sent me. So for about 13 months, I was a teacher there in the county jail. And all my students had been former drug addicts. And one of the problems that I saw with them was the lack of retention in whatever I was teaching. I would teach something very simple, math for second or third grades. Next day they would forget everything. So I had to teach them 20 times for them to retain one time. That was one of the problems. And so drugs definitely screw up a life, screw up the brain, and it screwed up my marriage. Because when I got out of that detention, my ex-wife filed for divorce. But in the end, it was better for me because it had been a marriage of 26 years of suffering because he was mentally unstable. So after I got out, I found a wonderful lady that we are now married for 12 years, have a beautiful child, and everything worked well in the end. God's good. I think that's all you need.
Yeah, thank you. Let me ask you something.
Okay.
Of the people that you were teaching in the county jail, the GED program, did you find any that were really trying to improve, or were they doing the GED? I guess the first question is, were they doing it out of boredom, or did they really want to learn and change their lives?
I think some of them did want to learn. For example, one of the fellows who had been a plumber, he was there because he was stealing tools in order to work. So he was not a bad guy, but he also used drugs. And he wanted to learn how to write and to read because he never learned. I think he left school in the elementary school. So I was able to teach him some basics of reading and writing. And I was very happy when he came to me one day and said, I wrote a letter to my daughter for the first time in my life. I was so happy with that. I was very proud of that too.
And how did you ever get an impression of how people got into drugs?
Oh, yes. I also did some study on how people get into drugs. I realized that through books that people have different temperaments and brain chemistries. The brain chemistry could make you type A, the very active and hyper, or type B, which is very calm. But to have peace inside our minds, this has to be balanced. The chemistry in the brain. So people with an imbalance tend to take drugs to bring it to the balance. And the problem with that, the drugs cannot imitate the brain chemistry. They can't imitate perfectly. The brain chemistry is very special. What the drugs do, they fill up and imitate and do some of the effects, but they also clog the receptors in the neurons. If by clogging the receptors, they have to use more and more drugs every time to get the same effect. And that's how they get hooked. And in the end, they end up having to buy more and more and more. They lose their money, end up having to steal to fill up the dependency.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible story because, like I say, it's your wife starts this, and then over time, it just snowballs.
Yeah,
And the effects are just absolutely unpredictable.
it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us.
Very welcome.